What would you do if a 9-year-old kid sitting outside a hospital in worn-out clothes and duct-taped boots told you he could make your paralyzed daughter walk again, and said it with the kind of certainty that made you stop in your tracks? It was a bitter morning in Birmingham, Alabama. That kind of cold that doesn't bring snow, but bites through gloves and fogs every breath. Outside the Children's Medical Center on 7th Avenue, people rushed through the revolving doors, scarves wrapped tight, coffee cups clutched like shields, eyes fixed forward. Everyone was trying to get through the day, or maybe just survive it. No one noticed the boy at first, sitting still on a flattened cardboard box near the entrance. No sign, no cup, just a battered notebook in his lap, a red beanie pulled low, and a pair of cracked boots, one of them sealed with duct tape across the toe. His name was Ezekiel Carter, Zeke for short, 9 years old. His coat hung off him like it belonged to someone else, sleeves rolled halfway up his arms. The hospital staff had tried to move him a few times when he first appeared. He wasn't supposed to be there, but after a while, they stopped. He didn't cause trouble, didn't beg, didn't wander. He just watched and drew, always drawing in that notebook of his, always watching. Most people figured he had a sick relative inside, maybe a sibling, maybe he was waiting for a ride, but nobody asked, not at a place like that, where pain lived on every floor and silence was often the only thing you could offer a stranger. Across the street, a dark silver Range Rover idled at the curb, engine humming quietly. Inside sat Jonathan Reeves, late 40s, business suit slightly rumpled, tie loosened, sleeves creased. His car was spotless, the kind that shimmered even under hospital lights. A man with money, clearly, but in that moment, he looked like someone who hadn't slept in days. In the back seat sat his daughter, Isla, 6 years old, her brown curls tucked neatly behind one ear. Her small legs were wrapped under a pink blanket, motionless. She stared out the window, silent, alert, but far away. Before the accident, Isla was a whirlwind, climbing trees barefoot, racing her cousins across the backyard, fearless, wild, alive. And now, after one split-second crash, she was paralyzed from the waist down. Doctors had confirmed it, therapists had explained it, and Jonathan had accepted it, or at least tried to. He stepped out, carefully lifting Isla from her seat, cradling her like she might shatter. She didn't protest, didn't speak, just leaned against his chest, eyes fixed on the sky. As they moved toward the doors, a quiet voice broke the air. "Sir, I can help your daughter walk again." Jonathan froze mid-step, not because it was outrageous, but because of how the boy said it. Not like a question, not like a joke, just calm, steady, like he meant it. He turned, puzzled. "What did you say?" Zeke stood now, tucking the notebook under one arm. His small frame looked even smaller against the backdrop of the hospital, but his voice didn't shake. "I said, I can help her walk again." Jonathan stared at the kid. His first instinct was disbelief, maybe even anger. He looked down at Zeke's oversized coat, the taped-up boot, the smudged lenses of the glasses hanging from his collar. It had to be some weird coincidence, or worse, a cruel prank, maybe even a scam. He clenched his jaw and turned without another word, stepping through the doors. But something about that voice stuck inside as the hours dragged on, appointments, test results, the same tired reassurances from therapists and specialists. Jonathan found himself thinking less about the science and more about that one sentence. I can help her walk again. Not hopeful, not desperate, just true. By early afternoon, the sky had cleared, but the cold remained sharp. Jonathan carried Isla out in his arms, her head resting against his shoulder. She was far too light. A 6-year-old girl shouldn't weigh that little. It reminded him, painfully, of how long it had been since she'd run, climbed, danced. And then, He saw him. Same spot, same cardboard box, same notebook on his lap. Only this time, Zeke was staring straight at him. Jonathan hesitated. He shifted Isla gently into the car seat and tucked the blanket around her legs. Then, slowly, he turned back toward the boy. "You again." His voice was low, not angry, not quite. "Why would you say something like that?" he asked, stepping closer. "You think it's funny to mess with people like that?" Zeke shook his head. "No, sir." Jonathan felt heat rise in his chest. "You don't know my daughter. You don't know what she's been through, what we've been through." Zeke didn't flinch, didn't look away. "I don't have to know her," he said simply, "to help." Jonathan's breath caught. He didn't know what he was expecting, but it wasn't that. He studied the boy for a moment. "You're what, 9? "Almost 10, Zeke answered. Jonathan almost laughed. "You're just a little kid sitting outside a hospital with duct tape on your shoes. What could you possibly know about helping someone like my daughter?" Zeke looked down, his fingers tracing the edge of the notebook. And then he said something Jonathan would never forget. "My mama used to help people walk again," he whispered. "She was a physical therapist. She taught me things. She said, the body remembers. Sometimes the body remembers, even when the mind forgets for a while." Jonathan stared at the boy, his skepticism tightening like a knot in his chest. "So what? What are you saying? You watched your mom stretch people out, and now you think you're a doctor?" But Zeke didn't blink. "I watched her help a man walk after 5 years in a chair," he said, lifting his eyes. "No machines, no nurses, just her hands, her patience, and her faith." Jonathan opened his mouth to push back, but stopped. Something about Zeke's voice, the way he said it, like he'd seen something no adult could explain. He looked around, almost hoping for someone to break the moment. A nurse passed, gave Zeke a familiar smile. A janitor walked by and nodded at the boy like they saw him every weekend. They knew him. Jonathan crossed his arms, the tension bubbling again. "I'm not giving you money, if that's where this is going." "I didn't ask for money," Zeke replied simply. "Then what do you want?" Zeke inhaled slowly. "Just 1 hour. Let me show you." Jonathan glanced over his shoulder. Isla was watching, her head tilted, eyes focused, more awake than she'd been all morning. He rubbed his forehead. "I should walk away right now." Zeke didn't move. "I should call security." Still, nothing. The kid didn't even flinch. Finally, Jonathan exhaled sharply, frustrated more with himself than anything. "Fine. You want to waste your time, kid? Meet us at Harrington Park, tomorrow, noon sharp. Don't be late." Zeke nodded once. "I'll be there." Jonathan turned without another word, lifted Isla into the SUV and drove off. But as he glanced into the rearview mirror, Zeke was still standing there, unmoving, like a statue of patience. Later that night, after dinner, Jonathan sat in his office surrounded by medical paperwork he wasn't really reading. He'd heard it all before. Recovery is slow, nerves are unpredictable, there are no guarantees. It was all technical, safe, emotionless. But the kid's words kept echoing in his head. "I can help her walk again." He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his eyes, when a soft knock tapped on the frame of the door. "Daddy?" Isla's voice was gentle. He turned. "Yeah, baby." "Who was that boy? The one outside the hospital?" Jonathan paused. "Just a kid we met." "Why?" She stepped closer, hands on the frame of her wheelchair. He looked like he believed it. "Believed what?" She pointed to her legs, then smiled, just slightly. "That I could walk." He stared at her. She hadn't said anything like that in weeks. She tapped her fingers gently on the armrest, like they were pretending to walk, and for the first time in months, Jonathan felt something dangerous. Hope. Harrington Park wasn't much to look at. Cracked pavement, rusted swings, and a sad excuse for a soccer field. Most weekends, it was abandoned. By noon the next day, it looked like any other Sunday. Cold, quiet, except Zeke was already there, sitting on a worn bench beneath the only oak tree that hadn't fallen apart. Same coat, same taped boot, but this time, his sketchbook was gone. Beside him sat a small gym bag and a neatly folded towel. At 12:07, the Range Rover rolled in. Jonathan didn't say a word. He pulled Isla from the back seat, gently lowered her into her chair, and wheeled her toward the bench. His arms were crossed tight, his face unreadable. Zeke stood as they approached. "Hi again," he said calmly. Jonathan gave a reluctant nod. Isla waved shyly. "Hi." Zeke smiled back. "Hi, Isla." Jonathan squinted. "How do you know her name?" "You said it yesterday," Zeke replied. "I remember things." Jonathan exhaled, pointing at the towel. "So, what now? Magic carpet ride?" Zeke ignored the sarcasm. "No, sir. Just the basics." He opened the gym bag and pulled out a small collection of odd objects. A pair of thick socks, a tennis ball, a plastic jar of cocoa butter, and a cloth-wrapped bundle that smelled faintly like warm rice. Jonathan frowned. "What is all that?" "Stuff my mom used," Zeke answered. "The rice pack is for heat, helps relax tight muscles. The ball's for pressure points." Jonathan folded his arms, skeptical again. Zeke turned to Isla. "If it's okay, can I work with your legs a little? Nothing will hurt. And if anything feels weird, just say stop. Deal?" Isla looked up at her dad. He sighed, then nodded. "Go ahead," she whispered. Zeke knelt down carefully. He unwrapped the blanket from her legs, placed the warm rice pack across her thighs, and waited. "You okay?" "It feels good," she said quietly. He nodded, gave it time, then slowly began to move her legs. No pulling, no forcing, just light rotations, gentle, intentional. Jonathan crouched slightly to watch, ready to step in, ready to yell if it went wrong, but it didn't. "You ever do this before?" he asked. Zeke didn't look up. "My mom used to take me to shelters. She helped veterans, folks who couldn't afford therapy. Said everybody deserves to feel human again. I used to carry her bag." "And she taught you this?" "She said the body don't always need machines, just attention." He tapped Isla's knee gently. "You feel that?" She blinked. "No." "That's okay," Zeke said. "I'll keep asking." He kept talking to her, asking about her favorite colors, her favorite snack, what shows she liked to watch. She answered quietly at first, but then she started asking him things too. "Do you live around here?" "Kinda." "Do you go to school?" "I used to." "Why not?" Zeke hesitated. "My mom got sick, then she passed. I'm figuring things out." Isla looked down. "I'm sorry." "Thanks," he said softly. Jonathan, who had been standing stiff as stone, finally let his arms relax. 30 minutes passed. Zeke tapped her ankle. "You feel that?" Isla blinked, then slowly nodded. "Like pressure." Zeke smiled. "That's a start." Jonathan's breath caught in his chest. For the first time in forever, something moved. Not her legs, his heart. Zeke looked up at Jonathan, his voice calm, almost quiet. "That's good." Jonathan squinted. "She says that sometimes in her regular therapy sessions." Zeke gave a slow nod. "Yeah? But those are in a room full of machines. Kids get tense around machines. Even if they don't realize it, their bodies tighten up. But here..." He motioned to the open air around them, the rustling trees, the breeze, the faint sound of sneakers squeaking on the nearby basketball court. "This feels different." Jonathan didn't reply, but something in his posture shifted. He was listening now, really listening. Zeke continued working with Isla, helping her stretch both legs and guiding her through simple movements. Nothing extreme, just gentle, repeated requests. Try wiggling your toes. She tried. Nothing moved. But her face didn't crumple. She didn't withdraw. She looked Zeke in the eye and smiled instead. "I'll show you again next week," Zeke said as he stood. "It takes time, but your muscles," he pointed at her thighs, "they remember. They just need to be reminded." This time, Isla's smile widened. "Okay." Jonathan cleared his throat, not ready to lean into what he was feeling. "We're not making any promises," he said, almost defensively. Zeke nodded. "I'm not either. I'm just trying." Jonathan looked at the boy for a long second. Then, almost out of reflex, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded bill. "Here," he said, but Zeke stepped back immediately. "No, sir. I don't want your money." Jonathan looked surprised. "Then why are you doing this?" Zeke shrugged with a calm maturity far beyond his years. "Because your daughter smiled." Jonathan turned to look at Isla, still smiling, still watching Zeke, and suddenly he couldn't understand how this kid, this boy in a coat that didn't fit, in duct-taped boots, who had no one left in the world, was giving so much to someone he barely knew. The following Sunday, the air had warmed, but Zeke still wore the same jacket. Not because he needed to, but because it reminded him of her. His mom used to call it his helper's coat. Said every real healer needed something close to their heart that reminded them why they care. By 11:45, Zeke was already at Harrington Park, towel spread out, supplies in place, a bottle of water beside him. Nearby, a dog barked. A few kids tossed a basketball on the cracked court, but he waited with full attention, like none of it mattered. At exactly noon, Jonathan's SUV appeared. Isla was already grinning before the car even rolled to a stop. "Hi, Isa," Zeke waved from the bench. "Hi," she chirped, curls bouncing as her dad lifted her out and settled her into the wheelchair. Jonathan looked tired again, but there was something different in his face. Less weight, less resistance. He gave Zeke a small nod. No words, but it was more than last week. Zeke smiled back, then got to work. Same warm rice pack, same cocoa butter. But this time, something had shifted. Isla was trying. "Can you press your heel into the ground?" Zeke asked gently. Isla closed her eyes, focused. Nothing. "That's okay," he said, not discouraged. "Sometimes your brain's looking for the right path. It's like walking through a crowd. You gotta push your way through." Jonathan stood behind them, arms crossed again, but now it was just to keep warm. And then, suddenly, he asked, "Why do you do all this?" Zeke looked up, thoughtful. "Because I remember what it felt like watching my mom help people. She made them feel like they mattered. I want to do that too." Jonathan nodded slowly. "You ever think about doing something else?" Zeke shrugged. "Sometimes, but this feels right." Jonathan looked down at Isla and saw her toes, tapping, not much, but moving. He didn't say a word. He just watched. They kept coming back, every weekend, same time, same bench. Zeke taught Isla how to wrap rubber bands around her ankles for strength. He rolled tennis balls under her feet to help her brain reconnect with her nerves. He showed Jonathan how to gently press the nerves behind her knees, how even quiet nerves still had a job, still remembered their purpose. Jonathan was no longer just a bystander. He started kneeling beside Zeke, started listening, started believing. And then came the bad day, the fourth Sunday. Zeke showed up early, like always, laid out the towel, set up the supplies. But when the SUV pulled up, everything was different. Isla wasn't smiling. Her eyes were red, her face blank. Jonathan looked tense, jaw tight. He carried her out, set her in the chair, then looked at Zeke. "She doesn't want to do it today." His voice was sharp. "She's been frustrated all weekend." Zeke walked over slowly. "What happened?" Isla crossed her arms. I tried to move my legs this morning. Nothing happened. Nothing. It's pointless. I'm tired of trying. Jonathan turned away, jaw clenched. Zeke knelt down beside her. You think I never got tired? She didn't answer. You think I didn't cry in a shelter when my mom was too sick to work and I couldn't do anything but sit there? Her eyes shifted toward him. You're allowed to be mad. I'm mad sometimes too. But if you stop now, the part of you that wants to walk might stop trying too. She looked at the ground. Then Zeke leaned closer and said it softly. I don't want you to give up, because I haven't. Silence, and then Isla whispered, barely audible. I'm scared. Jonathan froze. That was the first time she'd said those words out loud, since the accident, since everything changed. Zeke nodded. Me too. But scared doesn't mean stop. It just means you're close to something big. She wiped her face with the sleeve of her jacket. Okay, she whispered. Let's try again. And they did. Zeke's hands guided her through the exercises, softer now, slower, fewer words. Just presence, just patience. Jonathan joined in, helping shift weight, encouraging each twitch. And then, after 30 long minutes, her right foot moved. Not just a toe, the whole foot. It slid forward, slow, uneven, but it moved. Jonathan knelt down, his breath caught in his throat. Do it again, he said, and she did. Zeke didn't speak. He just sat back on his heels and smiled. Later that night, Jonathan stood outside his house on Crestview Drive. The street was quiet. The moon hung low and full, and for the first time in what felt like forever. He wasn't afraid of hope. He welcomed it. Jonathan had stopped asking himself who Zeke really was. At some point, that question just didn't matter anymore. Inside the house, Isla was giggling, retelling the story of her foot slide moment to her aunt on speakerphone. Her voice bounced off the walls like sunlight, and for the first time in 6 long months, the Reeves house didn't feel like a hospital. It felt like home again. But the real shift wasn't only in Isla's legs, it was in Jonathan's chest. The weight he'd carried, the guilt, the helplessness, the silent shame for not being able to fix what was broken, was starting to loosen. The wall he'd built between himself and the world was cracking, and for once, he let it. Monday afternoon, Jonathan sat in his office, staring at a contract he was supposed to sign last week. His phone buzzed every few minutes. Emails, texts, client updates. None of it felt urgent anymore. All he could think about was that moment in the park. His daughter's foot, sliding forward, belonging to her again. And the boy who made it happen. A 9-year-old in duct-taped boots with no last name he could trace. Jonathan opened a browser and typed, Ezekiel Carter Birmingham. Nothing. A few scattered hits, local newsletters, old clinic mentions of a Monique Carter and her son Ezekiel at a community center. No address, no photos, no recent records. Zeke was a ghost, except he wasn't. By Saturday, they were back at Harrington Park. But this time, something had changed. Jonathan brought an extra mat, a fold-out chair, a sandwich for Zeke. He didn't say anything, just placed it beside his gym bag. Zeke gave a soft smile. Thanks. And tucked it away for later. Ready, Issa? Let's do it, she grinned. The routine was smooth now. Heat packs, toe stretches, focused breath work. But this time, Jonathan sat cross-legged on the grass too, trying the motions Zeke explained, even messed one up. You're bending the wrong way, Zeke grinned. Jonathan smirked. I haven't stretched since college. Even Isla laughed. About 20 minutes in, Zeke pulled out a belt. Let's try something different today. He wrapped it gently under her knees, showed Jonathan how to hold the ends. She's going to try to lift both knees, just a little. We give her balance. She controls the movement. Jonathan blinked. You sure? Zeke nodded. She's ready. They waited. Isla took a breath, brow furrowing, and then her knees lifted. Not much, maybe an inch, but they lifted. Jonathan stared. You did that? She smiled wide. I did it. His voice caught. You really did. Zeke just watched quietly. See? The body remembers. You just have to be patient enough to let it talk. Jonathan turned to him, voice low. You're something else, kid. Zeke didn't answer. He didn't need to. He just kept working. After they packed up, Jonathan crouched beside him. Where do you go after this? Zeke shrugged. Around. Jonathan lowered his voice. You got a place to sleep? Zeke hesitated. Sometimes. Jonathan exhaled slowly. You ever think about staying with us? For a while? Zeke looked up, startled. You serious? I've got a guest room. You wouldn't be in the way. Zeke looked down at his hands. You sure your neighbors won't mind? A kid like me? Jonathan gave a short laugh. After what you've done for my daughter, if they've got a problem, they can move. Zeke didn't answer. Not right away. But Jonathan saw it, the shift behind his eyes. Not trust, not yet, but something close. The next morning, Zeke stood on the Reeves' front porch, a backpack on his shoulder, a rolled-up blanket tucked under his arm. Jonathan opened the door in sweatpants, coffee mug in hand. Right on time, he smiled. From down the hall, Isla's voice rang out. Zeke! He smiled back. Hey, superstar. Jonathan stepped aside. Welcome home. The days that followed were quiet, but full. Zeke had his own room, a real bed, clean sheets, a desk with a lamp. He didn't say much, but he never missed morning stretches with Isla. And she was moving both feet now, still in her chair, but not for long. Her brain was reaching again, finding old signals, sending them forward like a search party. One night, while Jonathan was doing dishes, he paused. Zeke? He called over his shoulder. The boy was sketching at the kitchen table, legs curled under him. Yeah? You ever think about going back to school? Zeke looked up. Sometimes. Jonathan nodded. You're smart. You could go far. Zeke tilted his head. I want to help people walk again, like my mama did. Jonathan turned, drying his hands. Then let's figure out how to get you there. Zeke smiled. Okay. They didn't say much else that night. They didn't need to. The Reeves house was no longer full of silence. It was full of the kinds of sounds that meant life was happening again. Laughter, footsteps, doodles, dishes clinking, the quiet hum of healing. It started with a nurse. She was walking her dog through Harrington Park early one Sunday and spotted a familiar girl, Isla, out of her chair, lifting her knees, moving her toes. Standing beside her was the same quiet boy who used to sit outside the hospital. She didn't interrupt, just watched. Then went home and told her sister, who happened to work in patient services. A few days later, one of the physical therapists approached Jonathan in the hallway. Hey, someone said your daughter's improving. That true? Jonathan smiled softly. Yeah, thanks to someone we didn't expect. And slowly, quietly, word started to spread. The next Sunday, something had shifted. When Jonathan and Zeke pulled into Harrington Park, two families were already waiting beneath the big oak tree. One had a boy with a walker, the other, a girl recovering from a stroke. Both had heard about the kid in taped-up boots who helped the Reeves girl move her legs again. Zeke glanced at Jonathan, unsure. Jonathan leaned in. You don't have to. Zeke adjusted the strap on his bag. I want to. That day, he gave up his usual session with Isla to work with the new kids. He showed their parents how to use towel stretches, how to warm rice packs just right, how to encourage without overwhelming. He didn't perform. He didn't preach. He connected. You're not broken, he told one boy. You're just learning a different way to be strong. Isla sat nearby in her chair, watching quietly, her hands folded, her eyes fixed on Zeke. She didn't complain once. On the drive home, she broke the silence. I like watching him help people, she said. Jonathan looked at her through the rearview mirror. Yeah? She nodded. It makes me feel like I'm part of something good. Jonathan smiled. By the next weekend, 5 families showed up. The week after that, 11. A local pastor brought folding chairs. A nearby diner started dropping off bagels and coffee. Someone printed flyers. Free movement classes, Sundays at noon, Harrington Park. They didn't mention Zeke's name. He didn't want them to. But everyone knew. When a local reporter arrived with a notepad and camera, Jonathan pulled Zeke aside. You okay with this? Zeke looked around. At the families, the kids laughing, Isla chatting with a girl using a walker. Then he nodded. As long as it's not about me, it's about them. The article ran on page 2 of the Birmingham Sunday Post. 9-year-old with a gift helps dozens heal in City Park. They didn't print his full name, at his request. But word spread. A doctor reached out to offer mentorship. A nonprofit offered to fund equipment. A retired teacher volunteered to tutor him privately. For the first time since his mother passed, people didn't just glance at Zeke. They saw him, but he never bragged, never changed his rhythm. He still laid out the towel the same way, still wore those same duct-taped boots, still checked in with Isla first before helping anyone else. And Harrington Park, once a place of silence and stiffness, had become a place of motion, of hope, of second chances. A place built, quietly, around a boy who once had no home, and now had become the heart of something bigger than himself. 9 Sundays. 9 Sundays of folded towels, whispered encouragements, and tiny victories. Isla was lifting her knees now, higher, stronger. But this Sunday felt different. Zeke felt it before they even arrived. The air was warmer, the wind moved slower, and Isla was silent in the back seat, focused, like she knew. When they got to the park, a small crowd had already gathered. No fanfare, just families setting up chairs, therapists kneeling beside kids, parents holding hands and holding hope. Zeke didn't say anything. He just unpacked his bag, rolled out the towel, and looked at Isla. You ready? She nodded. No smile, just stillness, determination. Jonathan wheeled her forward. Zeke knelt beside her. Same as before, he whispered. We help you stand. You do the rest. Jonathan moved behind her, gently placing his hands under her arms. Zeke guided her legs into position. Okay, he said softly. On 3. She closed her eyes. 1, 2, 3. Jonathan lifted, Zeke steadied, and Isla stood. Her legs trembled, her arms shook, but she was on her feet. The park went silent. A few gasped. One mother covered her mouth with both hands. Isla opened her eyes and smiled. I'm standing. Zeke blinked, swallowing something hard. Yeah, you are. Jonathan didn't move. He looked like he couldn't even breathe. Then, slowly, he let go. And she didn't fall. She stayed up. She's doing it, he whispered. His voice cracked. She's really doing it. Zeke stepped back too. She's been doing it. Then, because Isla was 6 and brave and didn't know how to be afraid, she took a step, then another, then a third, before collapsing into her father's arms, laughing and crying at the same time. He caught her, held her, his hands trembling. You did it, he said through tears. You really did it. Isla looked at Zeke. You said I would. He smiled. I said we'd try. That afternoon, no one left the park quickly. People stayed, talked, hugged, Some prayed. Zeke sat on the same bench under the oak tree, watching. He didn't say much. He never did. That night, back in the kitchen, Jonathan leaned on the counter while Zeke poured cereal. "You know you changed everything," he said. Zeke didn't look up. "I did?" Jonathan stepped forward and placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "My daughter walked today, and not because of a hospital, not because of a drug, because a kid with nothing decided to show up again and again, even when no one asked." Zeke nodded. "That's what my mom would have done." Jonathan's throat tightened. "I wish she could have seen this." Zeke looked up, eyes steady. "She did. I think she sees everything." Jonathan wiped his eyes. "Zeke," he said softly, "you're going to change a lot of lives." Zeke smiled faintly. "I already am. Sometimes the people with the least are the ones who give the most. Sometimes the ones who've lost everything are the first to show up for someone else. And sometimes miracles don't look like lightning. They look like patience, duct tape, and a kid who won't stop trying. If this story moved you, don't just watch it, share it. And if you know a kid like Zeke or a girl like Isla, tell them this: you matter, you're needed, and you are not alone.